Hello, everyone. I'm Walker Bragman, and I'm here with Guido Weiss, who is running in Florida's 21st district against incumbent Democrat Lois Frankel. First of all, Mr. Weiss, thank you for being here with me today, and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much, Walker. I really appreciate that. And thanks for having me.
So, first of all, how are you holding up with the quarantine and everything?
Well, it's been really interesting. Thankfully, I have a great team that was able to very quickly go from everybody running around doing field work to the greatest extent possible to dividing up and safely quarantining. I've got my family safe. The community, we're trying to do the best job we can to get out COVID-19 related resources. Instead of going on politics at first, our initial campaign has actually been helping the community out, in navigating this pandemic.
You know, you're not the first person to tell me, the first candidate to tell me that.
Yeah, it's just so important. I think a lot of the candidates running right now are really first and foremost community activists.
So obviously this has changed your campaign and your strategy. I mean, that's got to be difficult running against an incumbent Democrat like Frankel, who's been there for quite some time. Does that concern you at all?
So just on that first point, I mean, so many candidates could not qualify this year because of the March 1 in Florida. We had our first known case of COVID. That was the prime time for getting your petition signatures, for getting enough money to get on the ballot. And I remember I joined 3 or 4 letters with Republicans, Democrats across the state asking Governor DeSantis, can you please give us a little bit of slack? In New York, I think they did some slack, 30% decrease in signature and money you need to get on the ballot. We got nothing in Florida. So unfortunately, a lot of progressive candidates couldn't even get on the ballot. But in terms of going against Congresswoman Frankel, she's been elected in some way or shape or form for longer than I've been alive. This is the first primary we've had here in 8 years. And I'll tell you some of the pros and cons. And one of the challenging things is this, I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of these Democratic clubs, the local Democratic clubs. And I'm a Democrat. You go in there, you walk into the club and you say, my name is Guido Weiss. I'm a Navy officer. I was just working for Tulsi Gabbard with a Democrat for years. And I'm running on a progressive Democratic agenda. And you get people at times that can, I'm not joking, in your face, screaming at you, yelling at you, saying, how dare you run an election? And to me, it's been one of the most eye-opening experiences I've ever had.
So, yeah, that sounds pretty familiar for any political machine that exists. Here in New York, we have a fairly well-known political machine. I don't know if you've heard of Governor Cuomo, but yeah. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about COVID. What do you think the biggest lessons that we should be taking away from this crisis are as a country?
So first and foremost, healthcare for all, universal healthcare is something that I think people are really having a wake up to. And you can see that the populations are supporting that more than many in Congress are. But there are many that are being left off of their jobs and frequently have associated healthcare with their employment position. And that government employment insurance doesn't necessarily come with healthcare. And it's not just getting your COVID-19 test. We still have people with pulmonary issues and diabetes and all these things that all of a sudden have not that much money and no real healthcare system to turn to quickly and efficiently. I think number one is a universal healthcare system, Medicare for all. I was fortunate to live overseas and experience what it's like to live in a country where you don't have to worry about going into massive amounts of debt, bankruptcy, you name it, because of healthcare. I think also responsiveness and science. There's a whole, I think, group of progressive candidates getting in there that are trying to talk about science. We're not talking about things in Trumpian terms where that word is no longer even relevant in many cases to the conversation. And I think that some of our leaders on the scientific medical side have really showed us what we need to do to prepare for the next pandemic.
So how do you think the president's handling of the crisis has been?
I mean, I'm very upset around here to see how the president's been politicizing a global pandemic. To see how the president, I mean, just going into right now, we're still going through this global pandemic. The president has been attacking states that have been using a science-based approach. That's just a terrible, terrible example to show generations to come that grow up in an era where people who are taking a method and a science to combat a pandemic are being attacked because it might not be the right thing for politics or business at the time. And that to me has been just something that now we really need to push back on, and we really need to have those generation of leaders that are not going to accept that type of behavior.
It's funny you should say that, because today Cuomo in New York said that we're on track to open up on June 9th, or start opening up on June 9th. And I kind of feel like this whole conversation about reopening the country is somewhat premature. I mean, there's no herd immunity in America. We have no treatment for COVID, and we have no vaccine. And so while we might depress the curve, we're almost certain to have a second wave. And it does seem a little premature. So with that, how do you think the Democrats have been responding to this crisis?
Certainly. And just on your first point, I agree. We're already seeing cases either at the same level or in some states increasing. And the weeks that we've slowly started, that some have either slowly or rapidly started to open up. Now, in terms of the Democratic Party, I want us to be doing more to bring up the issue of, you've got only a fringe in the Democratic Party that wants big financial relief for people that are holding student debt. You've got people like myself and many others who are in huge amounts of student debt. And just a fringe of the Democrats are willing to make that a primary issue. Now, going back to the whole conversation of UBI and some sort of financial relief, $1,200, especially when you're not receiving your unemployment insurances and you're in New York. I'm in Palm Beach County, one of the most expensive counties in Florida. But you in New York City, $1,200 doesn't get you very far. If you've got a family, if you've been laid off of your job, many restaurant workers, I think the Democrats, there are some that are really pushing for $2,000, multiple installments, but there are some that are, saying, hey, we did a great job, pat us on the back, let's discuss it now. And that's my point of view right now. We as a party should be, let me rephrase that. We're not doing enough yet.
So let me ask, if you win your election and you do go on to get elected, a lot of progressives were talking about not supporting Nancy Pelosi back in 2018. I'm sure you remember. If she wins, which is not a guarantee, she does have her first general election challenger from her left this year. So if she wins, she will presumably run for speaker again. Do you think that you would back her for speaker again if she won?
I would really like to see other options out there. I remember when I was a staffer, and again, I was a congressional staffer until January, from 2016 until January 2020.
We'll get to that.
Okay, awesome. And I remember there was a fringe of, I don't want to say they're all progressive, but a fringe of within the Democratic Party that were saying, let me run, I'll put my name out there. And then all of a sudden there was some arm twisting and you could see it left and right. And then that fringe turned into a couple people, and then Nancy Pelosi was reelected as speaker. I would definitely like to see another option out there, because there are certainly people that I think will be more representative of the direction the country as a whole, not just the Democratic Party, but the country as a whole is going. So that's my answer. I don't know yet who that's going to be, but that's what I would like to see.
So, all right. So you brought it up. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about your experience in D.C. You were a legislative aide, or a legislative director, and a foreign affairs and defense advisor. Tell me a little bit about that.
So exactly, I started off with Congressman Sherman, working on the Foreign Affairs Committee. That was a different, and then I went into Tulsi Gabbard's office, working with the House Armed Services Committee and then the Foreign Affairs Committee. And I went from national security, foreign affairs type. My background is Hebrew language, Arabic language, Navy service, a bunch of overseas experience.
Right. So this comes after your Navy service.
It's all kind of at the same time. I've been a reservist for 5 years. So done some stints of short-term service in those 5 years, of quite a few trainings in schools. But this is all kind of at the same time. So then I go into working for Congresswoman Gabbard and working as a defense staffer. You see, as a defense staffer, how bad corporate money affects our system. If you look at the top Democrat and top Republican on the House Armed Services Committee, I believe when I crunched the numbers last year, they had each received over $200,000 from the military-industrial complex to their campaigns. You also see, and this was incredibly eye-awakening, you see the United States Navy being told by members of Congress, you need an extra aircraft carrier, something that costs, on the basic budget, $13 billion a year. The Navy saying, we don't want that aircraft carrier. We don't necessarily have the threat or the, we want to divert resources to other areas. There's a lot of other things you can do with that type of money. And the members of Congress, because of PAC contributions, saying, you know what, no, we're all experts on China. You're going to have that aircraft carrier, whether you like it or not. And telling, career defense officials that they're wrong because of corporate influence. That was, to me, one of the most eye-awakening things I've seen as a defense staffer working in Congress.
That's wild. That is, when you get down to how the donuts are made, I guess, or how the sausage is made. It's really quite disillusioning. How did that affect you? I mean, coming out of that, you obviously are running for office, so it obviously inspired you.
So I was thankful enough to work for Congresswoman Gabbard, who didn't take PAC money when I worked for her. So two plus years I was with her, no PAC money. So she wasn't one of these members of Congress saying, hey, big defense company, knock on my door, I'm going to do exactly what you say. She was not. She's very independent, and just, her decision-making process was different. How it affected me was I start looking at my hometown representative, Congresswoman Frankel, looking at where is she receiving her money? Is she receiving the money that these defense companies are putting in? Yes. Is that affecting her decision? Absolutely. Right now we have big ag down here, which in many ways has contributed to algae blooms and sea coral destruction, and will contribute. And they do the burns every year, which are giving people asthma and having other harmful effects. Is that member of Congress receiving tens of thousands of dollars from those companies? And then I call it hush money. You're not necessarily doing something for them, but when it comes time to be the representative of the community and speak out, you're doing nothing. Pfizer, the same thing. It's like that process of watching the defense process and then getting my eyes on my hometown representative and realizing, wow, my 4 generations of family lives in a district who's being represented by one of these members of Congress who takes 95+% of their campaign contributions from either big individual donors, which are usually have some interest of themselves, or corporate PACs.
It's unreal. It really is unreal. And having done a little bit of money in politics reporting, a little, not anything close to what some of my colleagues like Alex Koch do, but it is pretty eye-opening. So your website has an instructional video on how to track bills from your congressional representative. There's no question here. It's just a cool feature that I made note of that I haven't seen before. You also have a video of how to find her office. So it's sort of like activist tools on your website.
So if you don't mind, I'd love to comment on that.
By all means.
Thank you. So one of the big parts of our campaign is awareness and education. So, I go to these meetings across the district with anybody who will speak to me. I don't care where they're from, what neighborhood, what party. I'm trying to educate and raise awareness. And I say, hey, did you know that your member of Congress hasn't in 8 years had anything really go from, this is an initiative I'm doing from the district, and here's the final process for the country, and has been going up there and basically saber rattling. Did you know that? And here's the way to look at it through the data, the official federal data. Did you know, hey, Mr. and Mr. Environmentalist, that your member of Congress has given hundreds of thousands of dollars to fossil fuel companies while a sitting member of Congress through their personal financial disclosure form? Do you think that sounds like somebody who's really there to combat climate change and lead the way into changing our entire system from fossil fuels to green renewables? And there's more of these videos to come. We've got a few more that we haven't done yet, but we're trying to get those out to the community to say, these are the tools you have to evaluate your member of Congress, what they did, were they taking money from, were they giving their own money? And you find somebody like Congresswoman Frankel who's given hundreds of thousands of dollars to the party, and that changes where they sit in committee and all types of things. And that is one thing that I'm also trying to point out, is that this is a lot of ladder climbing and not a lot of assisting the people of Palm Beach County and the country.
So let's stick on that for a second, because you're in a purple district, and typically when you hear pundits talk about purple districts, there's always this sort of assumption that people in purple districts kind of like the fact that their Congress people take a lot of money from special interests, and that they vote along the lines of big business. Have you found that to be true in your conversations with people?
I haven't. Most of it has been, unfortunately, and that's one of the things we're really trying to do. And I was working in Congress for a couple of years before I even knew how this worked. Has been just not necessarily an awareness to the issue, or this idea occasionally from people within the establishment of, well, we got to win, so we need the money to win. And my whole point is, here's something I've been pondering a lot, is right now we're in a place where our country is more divided and we're in a similar age group than I've ever seen. It's horrific to see what we see every single day in terms of how charged everything is. I can post an ad about grapefruits and I'll get, responses that say Trump or die, all Democrats should go, or something from somebody in the Democratic Party who's very angry about talking about Congresswoman Frankel. I mean, in another context. So I do think that it's important that we're honest. I do think that the idea of corporate politicians, people who go there to serve companies and aren't spending time in those communities, which is the consistent feedback we get, leads to more divisiveness because people find other outlets that are more emotionally charged. That's my personal opinion. I think we need a representative who doesn't just go to the donor communities, who's doing community workshops and assisting those in every single community of our district.
So then how do you come, you have a progressive platform, you're running on the Green New Deal, you're running on Medicare for All, you're running on tuition-free college, I believe, or moving towards tuition-free college, I saw on your website.
Absolutely.
So how do you compete with the name recognition then? Because if you have a platform that people don't find objectionable, and these are undeniably popular policies if you look at the polling, across both parties, they're popular policies. How do you compete with the name recognition of somebody who's been in office for so long?
So there's a couple things there. I'll say one, you've got members of Congress with that type of name recognition who think they're untouchable. And then the spark you can light, and I've seen this, you tell one person in the community or in a household about certain policies that they might not have been aware of from that member of Congress and what you're pushing to do, and that can lead to 6 to 10 people. And we're already seeing people saying, I saw it, I saw you did a little ad, or somebody sent me a tile that you posted on Twitter. So I think that is one thing that, there is a natural flow of information that isn't necessarily by big television ads and billboards. And in some cases, when Ocasio-Cortez did Crowley, she wasn't able to send paper mail to the same people that Crowley sent 12 to 16 letters to. So there is, I think you can excite people with genuineness and information in a way that empowers. That's one aspect to it. The other aspect to it is this is a primary. The winning number in a primary down here, typically in the last 2 primaries in 2018, 2016, have been somewhere between 6,000 and 16, 18,000. We can do that. We can do that. We'll do it on a record low budget, but that's what we're going to strive to do.
So we talked a little bit earlier, and you mentioned that you spent some time abroad, and your website mentions that you spent some time in Russia and Israel. And tell me, tell me what are some of the biggest misconceptions you had before your travels that your travels, that were changed, I guess?
I'm so glad you asked that question. One, living overseas, especially as an expat within an expat community, you start to have conversations with the Japanese person, the Taiwanese person, the person from New Zealand, India, um, Italy, Denmark, you name it. And I'm talking about, we just start to get into policy conversations, and you hear about their $6 or €6 drug that we're paying $90, $120 for, and it's the exact same drug, but lobbying doesn't allow for us to have what either the generic or to negotiate with Medicare or negotiate with the drug companies. I'm sorry. That's one. That's incredible. Two, you find these people, and you have conversations with people overseas that talk about how, oh, I was in Denmark and I got paid a tiny stipend to go to school, and that's everybody in my country getting that stipend. And oh, by the way, that country has a national debt ratio that's much better than ours. When we're over 110, 120%, they have a much better financial portfolio as a country as a whole, because they have smart taxation policies and because they have great education policies, and people as a whole don't have as much debt. So that's one. You hear about these various policies that we dream to implement, but companies put a lot of money into media and politicians to fear monger the people out of them. That's, and the other one is when you spend time overseas and you're sitting there with a Palestinian or with a Russian or with somebody from China, and you have a human to human connection that you might not get if you haven't had to have that experience, and you're here watching people talk about Russia or China or what our media is putting out sometimes, you would assume that all these people are evil people based off of what you're seeing in the media. But then you sit down, and I lived with a Russian family right next to Ukraine, while I was studying, and I worked in Jerusalem, and I got to experience I worked for a feminist political party actually, and I got to spend a lot of time with Arabs in Jerusalem and Palestinians, and you start to build human connections that I think can go a long way. Those human connections and that mentality is put into the policymaker's perspective.
So did spending time in Israel affect how your position, I guess, on Israel? Your website is somewhat vague on the conflict.
Sure. I was fortunate enough to have a few experiences that are a bit different on the conflict in a region. I lived in Jordan with a family of Palestinians who came from Gaza to Jordan, and got to hear what they had to say about their life experiences. Spent time all in the West Bank. I visited settlements. I visited all the Palestinian major cities, and really went through those checkpoints. I'm not somebody who, I think Israel has a lot to offer. As a country, they have a lot to offer as a country to the world, technology, and being a relatively progressive country compared to the region. But there's also harsh realities on the ground there, and I understand those realities, and I want to work to end those realities, to find that. I'm a firm believer of a two-state solution, two peoples, two countries, side by side in peace. That's my dream, honestly. I spent some time in Iraq as I was in Iraq while the campaign to Mosul was starting, and saw people coming out of ISIS-controlled territory and vehicles that were bombed out and all that stuff. It was just horrific to see, and that brings me back to thinking, why are we in this situation? It starts to get a much broader foreign policy perspective when you get to have some of those experiences.
So, oh wow, I think that is all of the questions that I have for you. So I'd just like to ask you, every state has sort of their quirks, right? So what is the most Florida thing about you?
Can I just one moment while I think about that? Let's see. I'll just do one in my neighborhood. And this is my South Florida-ness, I think I'm addicted to Cuban food. I just literally cannot get enough Cuban food. And while things have been closed down for COVID-19, I talk to my wife all the time, and we're like, I just want to go to the cafe over there, and I just want to get some of those croquetas and other dishes and arepas, and it's almost like it's been a challenge not to have that food that's from the community that I love so much. But outside of that, I love being from South Florida. I love that I live in a neighborhood that on one side is the Everglades and on the other side is the Atlantic Ocean with the Gulf Stream, clear water going through it, and it's just it's beautiful, and I love it.
You grew up there?
Yep. Grew up here. I've got 4 generations of family
You
here.
were a Boy Scout there too.
I was a Boy Scout here. Were you?
I, yeah, yeah, for a very, very, very brief time in my youth.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No,
Um,
I felt an affinity as as a fellow Jew who joined the Boy Scouts.
they- we're now they've got some other versions of that now. It's co-ed now, and
Yep.
things have changed a lot. I remember back in the day, you were kind of a minority in a large organization, but yeah, I definitely learned a lot from it. I talked to my wife, who she was like, I wish in the Girl Scouts we did cool stuff like camping and playing with knives and first aid. She's like, we did, in the Girl Scouts they had these classes that were constructed of women's expectations in society, basket weaving, and you
It's
know.
it's funny because my mom was the troop leader
So
of our Boy Scout troop. So you doing all the knots and whatnot, and
she sounds pretty awesome.
yeah, it was fun. So, Mr. Weiss, thank you so much for taking the time and speaking with me. Tell everybody where they can find more information and get involved.
Thank you very much, Walker. And I really enjoy what you're putting out. And my team was so excited that we were able to join you today. For everybody out there who wants to learn more, please go to voteguido.com. We're incredibly responsive to your questions. We would love any type of support, whether it's volunteering on the phones or in person, or even financial contributions. We are running a grassroots campaign with no PAC money, trying to change Palm Beach County for the better and bring a more honest leadership to this county. So again, thank you very much, Walker. Thank you to everybody who's tuning in.
The last thing I'm going to say before I end this recording is that the ad that you have on your website with your grandmother is adorable, and people should watch it because it's adorable.
Thank you very much. Her life story is insane. She lived in sewers with rats and throughout World War II and experienced incredible things. And she was crying when I told her I was running for Congress, and that to me is so motivating because you see a generation of people who's an immigrant and I'm taking this a little more serious than what you said, but you find somebody who's an immigrant and they see their grandson running for Congress, fighting for justice to immigrants and fighting for better living standards, and she has been just so excited about this all.
Well, best of luck to you, sir, and hopefully we can do this again. And tell everybody when the primary is.
August 18th. Please vote. August 18th. I'm one of 2 candidates. Please support this campaign. Thank you very much again for tuning in.
Thanks very much.